Hey, so what you're about to watch is exclusive content available only in my paid coaching program for Twin Flames, the Introduction to the Journey. This is the private Facebook community, and I'm posting exclusive content there all the time. And I just want to give you a taste of that. We talk about everything in there. This particular video, I did a very, very deep dive on the topic of death. So very in depth. It was a student who had a question. I have redacted the names of students to protect their privacy, but this is for you to get a peek at what we're doing in there. Enjoy.
Hello. We're going to talk about the experience of leaving your body, or what people call death. She said, I have a question about death, or the thing we do when we die. Even though we don't truly, concretely know what happens, there are some theories, talks from people with near-death experiences. So the soul goes back to source, to different planes of existence. Do we retain our thoughts, memories, and feelings when we leave the body? And do we find our loved ones again and reunite in the spirit plane or whatever? Or do we just forget the you that was you on earth is gone forever at death? So we know exactly what happens when you do the thing that we call die. The current system of things that we live within, which is itself dying, going away, it's being transformed. It's hit us over the head for hundreds of years, if not longer, with things like there's no such thing as ghosts. Nobody knows what happens to you when you die. You don't have a soul, which is technically true. You are a soul. There's no God. Nobody knows what God is. Nobody knows what the meaning of life is. There's no such thing as aliens. There's no such thing as telepathy, just on and on and on. With all this propaganda to convince you that you're limited, and all in an attempt to control you. So to organize and bring structure to that fear-based system, they first gaslight you and lie and say nobody knows what happens when you die, or if there's ghosts, or if there's telepathy, or they just say there isn't such a thing. But listen to us, you need us, and we will tell you what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. You better be good, because if you're bad, you're going to go to hell. All right. So that was kind of the whole idea behind that. And in our modern world, they tell us these things so that they can get us to agree to just all kinds of things, use their money, which money itself isn't bad, but the system they've devised, not so much. Give in to the current modern day control structures, which that's a whole conversation to be had right there. Social media, the government, banks, peer pressure from the woke mob, or just whatever, just there's various different forms. Now, the truth is these things do exist, and we know exactly how they work, and there's lots of evidence. There's no evidence that you go somewhere when you die. Nobody knows what happens. Really? Then how come there's all this evidence over here? So you could say that the study of out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, etc., is a soft science in the same way that perhaps psychology is what they call a soft science. There have been studies done on the power of prayer. and making repeatable empirical observations in a controlled way, right? And getting the same results every single time. And if you understand what I just said, then you already kind of know what the scientific method is, how to validate a hypothesis or to revalidate a theory that you have. When you notice a phenomenon in the universe works a certain way and you test it again and again, and you get the same results each time with a control group in place to make sure that it's really this process that is causing the effect. Because as they say in science, correlation does not necessarily mean causation. So that's why you have a control group. That's what I'm saying is there have been thousands of scientific studies, legitimate scientific studies done on these phenomenon. And it's not on television because that's the system. They want to control you. It's fear-based. They want to convince you that you're limited. Please use our money. Please pay your tax to us. Put this thing in your body. You may or may not want to put in your body. If you don't think the way we think, you're bad. We're going to call you names like ist and or phobe. And it comes from both sides of the political spectrum. What a bunch of nonsense politics is, which has absolutely nothing to do with governance at all. But again, without going too far down that rabbit hole, that's just a distraction so that you won't look at all the legitimate evidence that there is to validate these phenomenon. So yeah, and you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that there are people who report near-death experiences. And the thing is, they all have the same exact mechanism to report. They all report the same mechanism of leaving your body. So where you can muddy the waters with a scientific observation like this would be to apply some deeper meaning to it. Just look at the function. Look at how it functions. Like when you leave your body, what happens? The way that people feel, and I've come across multiple aggregators of this information, Greg Braden being one of them. Joe Dispenza has talked about this. There's lots of books that have been written. I'm reading a book right now about reincarnation. There's one person who was it a boy or a girl? I don't remember. But they received a heart transplant from I believe it was a young girl who was murdered. Nobody knows who did it. And the heart itself actually somehow retained memories. And the new child, the heart transplant recipient, was able to describe the assailant, and they found him. And they convicted him. And he went to jail. And I believe I heard about that from Joe Dispenza. So if you look around, there's lots of information about this. Again, there's been lots and lots of legitimate soft science experiments done, which, again, even psychology is a soft science. Now, going deeper into your question, you leave your body and you feel immediately an indescribable peace, just a complete acceptance. For those of you who have experienced what has been called Satori, you understand. So that's like the complete cessation of thoughts and emotions, and you're just there being. Now, you do retain thoughts and memories, but to access thoughts and memories is a very different experience. You don't have the mind like we do when we are incarnated in a physical body that's always ruminating and going and going. And just random things come up. I would describe the recall of memories as more of a creative process. And the way that that information, so again, I'm trying to explain this in technical terms like mechanics, function. So if you notice that, rather than muddying the waters with meaning. So what the experience of memories would feel like when you are in your natural state, which is to say not in a physical body, it's like intuition, just like that, which the equivalent example that I always use to explain that to people, like, how would I know I was experiencing intuition if it was happening to me? Well, it feels like deja vu, just like it, just like deja vu. The information is different because with deja vu, it's information about, I've done this before. And it's because you have, there's no such thing as time. So there's this weird, eerie knowing in your torso that I've done this before. And then additionally, there's another process going on. So there's two things going on. There's the weird, eerie knowing that I've done this before that we would call deja vu. And then there is a thought process coming from the mind going, how do I know I've done this before? Is this true? Should I believe this? Blah, 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 right? But still, the knowing that you've done this before is there. That's the soul. So there's these two things going on, and we often get confused about that when we experience deja vu, because we have this propensity to identify as the mind, right? And so the mind, it's clear that this is a very weird sensation, this knowing. And it's also somehow kind of clear that it's not really coming from the mind, but you think you are the mind. So you're the one so you think you're the one asking these questions, but you're just temporarily in not a state of remembrance, right? Because ultimately the true spiritual journey is remembrance of who you already are, consciousness. It's very non-conceptual. When you experience deja vu, that weird, eerie knowing is not thought. It's not concept, right? Now, intuition, it feels like deja vu, but the information is different. With deja vu, it's information about, I've done this before. With deja vu, and with intuition, it's information about the future, about somebody else, or something that's true for you, perhaps. Now, here's what's going on. Perhaps you've seen me showing this around before. And this again, this is as old as time itself, that, I didn't even come up with it. Well, I did come up with this, but ironically, like months later, after I already wrote this down on my own, just from being a spiritual teacher and teaching this to you guys, I kind of figured this out. And I know a lot about physics too. And I came across other teachers that were using this exact same diagram. And I found out this has been around for a long time, thousands of years. Also, the teaching of reincarnation, people reporting out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences. It's always the same story, mechanically, functionally. There's lots of accounts all throughout history. So this is your higher self in heaven, which is where you go. You never really left when you do the thing that we call die. And it's the energy part of the universe. It's in modern science, they call it the field, or perhaps the Higgs field, or dark energy. It's the vacuum of space. It's the spaces between the matter, right? It's the field. Think of empty space as a malleable clay or fabric. And that's exactly how gravity works, right? So gravity is the bending of space around an object. Now, that is a very tenuous higher plane, Plane. The Large Hadron Super Collider, they've detected this field. They finally proven, yeah, there is not really a vacuum. So think of it this way. You're sitting in a room. There's no air running. There's no fan. There's no air conditioning. You're just sitting still. Do you notice the air around you? Not really. What if you do this? Blow on your hand, right? Will you feel something hitting your hand? Right. And now we know there's little molecules that make the air, oxygen, nitrogen, and a few other, I believe inert gases in the atmosphere. So that's essentially what the Large Hadron Super Collider is. It's a particle accelerator, basically. It's an atom smasher, if you will, as they call it. And when you add enough energy to one of these particles, it like hits a wall in dead air. There's like nothing there. It's empty space. It looks like empty space, but you've added so much energy to this particle that it does smash into something. Just like when I do this, I blow on my hand. I added energy to the air molecules, and then I can feel it on my hand. You see, that's essentially what the Large Hadron Super Collider is. Hadron, I think it's hadron. And so they've detected this field, which is the fabric of space. Now, it's the mental universe. So even ancient Hermetic philosophy, it's like the first thing when you learn ancient Hermetic philosophy, that the universe is mental. So even the Bible explains this, that what does it say? You were created in the image and likeness of God, right? So your body, mind, and soul, right? Well, same thing with God, or you could call it the all. If you don't like the word God, right? So there's perhaps religious dogma attached to the word God. Now, you've got, so the universe is two components. And people in kind of the new agey community, it's kind of sad because they limit themselves by going, oh, it's the universe. And yeah, there is the universe operating like a machine, bringing you things. It'll always match your energy, for example, right? Like with the law of attraction. But you're leaving out the most important part, which is the source, the self, the true self, which is, you could say, a layer deeper than the soul. Okay. And let me just pause right there. Think of, and this is just an analogy, but think of a soul as an individual leaf from a tree, a maple leaf. And then you step back and you look at the whole tree, and it looks like a big leaf, right? It's got a trunk, which is the stem, and then it bushes out. It makes a shape, right? It's kind of got that fractal quality. Do you remember that from the introduction to the journey? We kind of talked about fractals. So you're just a little piece of the whole, WHOLE. A soul is a holographic reproduction of the source. Okay. And when it takes place in the universe, it's mental from the perspective of, say, the all. It's so tenuous, though. It's metaphysical energy. But because of basically the theory of relativity, and I'm not going to get into that part, it has to do with perspectives. The phenomenon can be measured, say, when you get into a conversation about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, but I'm not going to get into it. If you want to know what I'm talking about, take the manifesting course. I explain all this stuff in there. But from your perspective as a de-incarnated soul, it's just being. So it's a holographic fractal representation of the source where it's just being. But it's so tenuous. Remember, we can't even detect this field without the Large Hadron Super Collider. It's we barely even realize there's anything there. We barely have the technology to notice that there's something there. Okay. And, the Large Hadron Super Collider is a tinker toy compared to what maybe other civilizations have that fly circles around us with whatever technologies they have. But so the universe is partly physical. So you could say that's the body. So planets, stars, nebulae, etc. And then you've got the mental universe, which is this field that I'm speaking of. That's the mind. So you got body and mind. That's the universe. What about soul? What about source? Well, again, you are a holographic representation, a fractal little chunk of the whole as a soul. And the way that I've kind of constructed my hypothesis actually lines up perfectly with what we know in the science community, physicists, astrophysicists. It's the exact same mechanism. Consciousness is energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. So you leave your body, you return to your original state. So the Father, as it were, right? So in the Bible, it said Father, Son, Holy Ghost, right? Well, the Son, Jesus, represented physical mass, which is, it's really the whole entire physical universe. But that was just the best analogy they had thousands of years ago when they wrote that thing, right? The Holy Ghost being the mental universe. Think of, it's like a cloud, like a ghost. And it's extremely tenuous, very, very faint, very thin. And if you back out far enough, again, because of relativity, right? Einstein's theory of relativity. If you were actual Father, God, as it's been called, right? It's not really male or female or anything, but and to look at the whole universe on a table, everything's always happening all at once, all at the same time. And you would see that this is the mind. of God. But from your limited perspective, you're very, very tiny little component of the whole entire mental universe. It's so tenuous that you experience it as non-duality, as just being, pure being and bliss. So, and also, when you reach these higher planes, planes, what they call heaven, there is no time. Time is meaningless. So all of these individual incarnations that I'm pointing to now are all happening at the same time from the perspective of the higher self. Well, let's pretend that all of these different points down here instead represent different points in time in your current incarnation. So this was, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, last week, right now, and then 10 years from now. Let's just say, right? So you're experiencing deja vu right here, which is a weird, eerie knowing. It's not conceptual. It's not mental. And that's why the mind is like, what? Is this true? What? Should I believe this? Have I done this before? Yeah, your soul is just pinging you. It's just pinging you. Right? Like when you ping somebody, like you text somebody on your cell phone and you go, hey, you're just pinging them, right? Your soul, it's pinging you. You're where you should be. You're good. Thumbs up, right? Why do you feel like you've done this before? Because you have. But which you is it? Well, you feel that intuition. It's the weird, eerie knowing. That's the real you. You're literally being given like a quick hit of pure non-duality energy. From your perspective, the higher self in heaven, your higher self, is non-duality because you are in density. Whether it's duality or not, actually, again, changes because of the theory of relativity. Because of relativity. Free will increases the higher your perspective. Again, God looking down at the universe on the table can't see everything that's going on in the universe. And if you want to understand why that works the way it works, just investigate the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Okay. You can't know where a particle is going and how it's going to get there at the same time. You can only know one piece of information. Where is a particle going and where is it right now? Those are your two choices. You can know one or the other, but not both at the same time. And it's because of the theory of relativity. It's that higher perspective. Big God looking down at the universe on the coffee table in his living room. Right? Looking down at, not he, but it, right? God's not a man. But you know what I mean. You can't know everything that's going on because of this principle. So that's where free will comes in too. And that process is going on similarly between your higher self and you down here incarnated in a body. So both it turns out are true. Both, yes, you've done this before and you have free will. It's not either or, it's both and. And the mind hates that. Because the mind says it has to be either or. But I got news for you. In physics, they deal with this shit all the time. Just look at the double slit experiment and the collapse of the wave function. How can a particle be a wave and a particle at the same time? I don't know, but it is. Okay. And there's even the theory of information realism, which is validating that the field must be mental. To some degree, it's information. And these are real physicists that are talking about this. This isn't some guy in his basement. Interesting. And so what does it feel like when you leave your body? Well, it's a lot like deja vu intuition. It's that same, or satori. All of these, deja vu, intuition, satori, all of these are deeply spiritual experiences. It's this knowing, it's this sense. It's like raw sense. Sense itself, it's pure peace and bliss. It's wholeness. It's stillness. These are all words to point you at what it is. So your mind might be sitting there still having a lot of problems with what I'm saying, but your mind can't understand anything that I'm saying to you. It's incapable because the mind is duality. It's limited. Non-duality is unlimited, singularity, right? And again, in physics, they even have a word for that, singularity. A singularity. It's infinite. So that's what death feels like. It's not death. I mean, I don't want to suffer when my body shuts down. I hope there's no pain, or at least very little. But once you leave, it's bliss. There's a reason they call it heaven. And you could be looking down at your body. Now, any thought, in quotation marks, is instantaneous. And the way a thought, if we could even call it that, feels like is going to feel like satori, deja vu, or intuition. These three all have a similar quality to them, a similar feeling. I'm not talking about emotion. I'm talking about how it feels, right? Like touching, like a sense, feels. How does it feel? Like touching, but it's not touching. It's just pure sense. And with deja vu and intuition, which feel the same, the information is different. Somebody just decided to give those two things different words, but it's really the same thing. It's just in either case, the information is different. Again, deja vu, information about the present, intuition, information about the future, perhaps, or somebody else, or something that's true for you, right? But that's the closest, that's actually a pretty doggone accurate explanation of what a so-called thought is going to feel like when you are de-incarnated. And it's so tenuous. It's not thinking. It's not like now in our bodies when we think, how it's a very visceral process. It's really intense too. The thinking that a human does. It's not like that at all. It's like satori. And you're essentially just an energy cloud. If you quote unquote think, which again feels like intuition or satori or deja vu, whatever you think of, so to speak, think, again, I want to be really clear what I mean when I say think in this context, because it's not really thinking, it's being. But when that happens, you are instantly transported to whatever it was. So if one of these experiences comes up regarding, say, a particular person, you're going to find yourself in their presence instantaneously, or you could travel to the past. Like one of the things that I've always wanted to do when I go back to heaven is to go watch Neil Armstrong walk on the moon or something. You can do that. You can do that. Your next question was, does the soul go back to source? It can. You can do that. If you go back to source, you're going to be leaving the universe. And that's fine. But you're going to lose all of your individual likeness. All of this goes away. And you might have more things you want to do. But you can do that. And let's talk about source briefly. To understand source, so we've talked in depth about the 3D universe, physical matter, the mental universe, heaven, which again, it's only mental from a macrocosmic perspective of God Almighty. From your perspective, it's non-duality. It feels like Zen because of relativity. But you're a single soul within a shit ton fucking huge universe. The universe is so big. I can't even explain how big it is. And we're just now finding that out as a species, just how massive it really is. We can't even see all of it because the universe is expanding faster than light can travel to us. Now, what is the Father, as it's been called? And there's different names for it in different religions. I just happen to live in the United States, and Christianity is prevalent here, so I'm just grabbing that as a quick analogy. But it is, it's source, it's the true self, it's ultimate consciousness, it is complete non-duality, and it's infinite. So to explain what that is and where you would be going, so to speak, it goes like this. And I kind of explained this in the introduction to the journey, but I'll do it again. So imagine you have a thing like a space rock. So here's my thing. Here's my object. And I have a place, empty space. It's a vacuum, which is nothing. And we'll just pretend that it's a true vacuum, even, which do exist for a very short period of time from time to time, right? You can have a certain area of empty space, which is truly a vacuum temporarily, although extremely brief. So you got empty space, place, nothing, and an object, a rock, thing, nothing. And that's easy for the mind to understand. Why? Well, that's duality. Thing, nothing. Object, place. Okay. And you can put the thing in the nothing even. And things actually emerge from the nothing. That's where the vacuum breaks down, right? Matter, antimatter. By the way, there's a really great documentary that I have all the manifesting students watch called Everything and Nothing. It's called Everything and Nothing. And I think it's only available on Netflix. You'll find it if you look around. It's all of these concepts that I'm explaining to you in layperson's terms. And really, really entertaining too, like good video. And he travels all over the world and interviews all these different people. And it's good. It's really good. Everything and Nothing. Well, anyway, so you got thing and nothing. Okay. Now, what do you have when you have neither thing nor nothing? And you can't say nothing because that's one of the choices. You cannot say empty space, because here's the thing. When you have neither a thing nor a place, empty space, the mind wants to say, well, I guess that would be empty space. But wait, it's not that. I can't pick that. That's not a choice. And the mind, even worse, it's going to say, well, that's pointless. It's not. Watch this. If you were to ask a physicist, even an atheist physicist, where did the Big Bang happen? Where did that take place? They're going to go, well, yeah, we don't really have a way to answer that question. And you're going to be like, what, you don't know? And they're going to go, no, it's not that we don't know. It's just that there's not really a way to answer that question. What do you mean? Well, because before the Big Bang, there was no such thing as place. There was no empty space. Really. And there's a reason that so they have deconstructed the expanding universe and they've basically gone backwards. Think of it like blowing up a balloon. And they know the universe is expanding. So they said, okay, let's just rewind that and play it back. So what would happen, mathematically and observationally as well, if we rewound the expansion of the universe? And that you don't quite get to a single point or to a place where there's no thing, because there can't be a thing or nothing. You need a place, empty space, nothing to have thing. Because as soon as you have thing, you have a place, you have a space. There's a thing in the nothing. And neither of those existed before the Big Bang. So even like the math, when they reverse engineer the expansion of the universe, they calculate all the way back to the very beginning, to the singularity. That's what they call it. And you get almost to that very end, but you can't, the math, it won't let you. Like math doesn't work anymore. You can't even represent it with the number 0 or the number 1. Like math doesn't work. There isn't a number in existence that you can use to represent a true singularity. It's not even theoretical. Math breaks down, logic breaks down everything, all mentalism, all of it. If you went outside the universe, where would you go? Well, that's a place. It's empty space. You can't go outside the universe. What's going on here? Right, indeed. And we can't understand it. We're not capable. Physicists have these conversations about how the mind is linear, and you can't understand these things because the mind is linear. And spiritual teachers call it duality, linear, past, future, plus, minus. But spiritual teachers, same thing, past, future, plus, minus, yin, yang. I like it, I don't like it. Duality, linear, right? Physicists talk about that. Yeah, we can't understand this. We can try to represent some of this shit mathematically, but it's really fucking hard to do that. So when you return to source, where do you go? You don't go anywhere. It's the great mystery, and it's always going to be a mystery to the mind. And the mind is just either going to be like, wow, or it's just going to invalidate. Oh, must not be true. I can't understand it, so it's not true. Well, the mind is very arrogant sometimes. It thinks that if it can't understand, then it must not be true. Where did the universe come from? I don't know, the great mystery. We're never going to explain it. Concept itself breaks down when you almost reach the beginning of the Big Bang. And they've proven that mathematically. So how are you ever going to conceptualize it? You cannot. And that's what a physicist is going to tell you, at least an honest one. And most of them are. And returning to the source, nothing's going to hurt you if you do that, right? You can't be destroyed. You're eternal. You are eternal. You are source. Do we retain our thoughts, memories, and feelings when we leave the body? And do we find our loved ones again and reunite in the spirit plane or whatever? Yes, of course. Of course you do. What do you think happens when you do this? And there's lots of spiritual teachers that have talked about like soul families and soul groups. And that's kind of where I found other people were using this diagram when I found information about that. And I was like, son of a gun, that's my diagram. And I figured this out doing what I do for a living and, having all this knowledge about science. It just seemed the only logical explanation to me. So they're all there. You're not alone. Again, we were told, just to come full circle, we were told you're alone. It's a harsh, empty universe out there. Nobody knows what happens to you when you die. You don't have a soul. There's no such thing as telepathy, yada, yada, yada. All baloney. There's no evidence. Really, how come there's a bunch of evidence then? We're being monitored by extraterrestrials. There's no evidence. Really, how come there's all this evidence then? I hope I've blown your mind today. Later.